Welcome, everybody. Everybody get settled down a little bit. Hope you've been having a great conference. And I'd just like to welcome Gary Smith.
So welcome to the Pollstar Honors presentation. We're very pleased today to have a very deserving and unique individual here with us to accept this award. And here in front with family and friends, would you please welcome our recipient of the 2017 Pollstar Honors Award, Mr. Don Law. Thank you. Before we invite Don up to the stage, we have a little background. We have a number of video tributes, and we have WME, Worldwide Head of Music. Mark Geiger will actually make the awards presentation. So, much like music in San Francisco is always associated with Bill Graham, in Boston and New England, the name Don Law and concerts have been synonymous for decades. Don grew up with a music legacy, as his father was a very well-known Columbia Records producer, and I believe Don was actually still in school when he started promoting concerts. So in the early days of the concert business, he operated the legendary Boston Tea Party Club, where he helped break bands like Led Zeppelin, Fleetwood Mac, Jethro Tull, and any number of others that stayed loyal to him over the years when they came back and played the arenas. Now, over the years, Don has quietly built an empire in the Boston area, becoming one of the most successful and savviest promoters in North America, to the point of selling the Don Law Company in 1998 for $92 million to SFX Entertainment, which of course today is Live Nation. And although he's still president of Live Nation New England, he also operates a number of venues, including the House of Blues, under his own banner, Crossroad Presents. And there is a lot more I could tell you about Don and his history, but the best person to tell his story is Don himself. So he will do that in a little bit when we invite him up here. I met Don many years ago, and for all of his accomplishments, I've always found him to be very low-key, but always gracious and humble, a true gentleman. I think one of the things that I wanted to say to you, Don, you can see the award up here. The Honors Award says Pollstar on it, but I really believe this is from all of your peers in the industry. So on behalf of Pollstar, thank you for being here with us today. Would you please roll the video?
Hey, Don Law, Jimmy here, backstage at Irvine, finishing up the year. Just wanted to take a quick moment to congratulate you on the Pollstar Lifetime Achievement Award. You and I go back a long way to the Paul Small days. You've done pretty good for yourself, young man. So keep up the good work. I'll see you next year. Congratulations again.
It seems that we've reached the era of the gongs, the awards, and the thank yous very much is for 50 years or whatever it is of working in this ridiculous environment that we call home. I've known you now since beginning of 1969, on and off, as the years have gone by. I remember you being a very proud guy of the great Boston Tea Party in its original and later locations. And I've always had a great deal of enjoyment talking to you. For a while you disappeared. Then you became part of a great conglomerate. But all the time I think you were a music guy, and I value the fact that there's just one or two of us who can remember what it was like way back for all the right reasons. So I hope you enjoy your gong. I expect to see it very shortly. I'd like to get a better deal out of you if you can. Maybe you can give me a concession on the drinks and the car parking. Very best wishes to you from me and Arthur.
Hey Don, Pete Wolf here from the J Gals Band. I remember when we first started at the Boston Tea Party and you carried us into the Boston Garden, even into Fenway Park. And congratulations on your well-deserved Pollstar Achievement Award. Yamagama Gumaluma. If it's in you, it's got to come out, because that's what rock and roll, Don, is all about.
Hey Don, I'm out here in California. I found an early picture of one of the first times we worked together, and I thought I would just sit here and tell you how proud I am to know you, how grateful I am for all the many, many years we've worked together and all the mutual friends, musicians, and in the business that you have shepherded and kept going with so much class and integrity and perspective and humor, and above all, you love the music. You're a good guy in a business that's full of weasels, so thanks for being my friend and for supporting so many of the artists and taking the high road. And congratulations on this Lifetime Achievement Award. I send you my love. I'll see you on the sailboat. Bye, honey.
Hey, Don. It's James. Still sort of on cloud nine after Fenway, but I wanted to add my voice to the chorus of congratulations for this Pollstar recognition of a lifetime of making music happen. So no one knows better than me what that means. And I am so grateful to have been able to work with you over the years and to count you among my friends. So congratulations, Don. It's well deserved. I wish I could be there in person, but do the right thing. You always do.
Hi, I'm John Landau, and Don and I have been friends for over 50 years. We met in the mid-60s when I was at Brandeis University and playing in a band called the Jelly Roll, destined for the scrap heap almost immediately. And Don was at BU and working with a booking agent. And Don wound up booking my band for a little while. And we got to know each other that way. Then a little time passed and I became a record producer. And I had the good fortune to work with a wonderful artist named Livingston Taylor back in, I think, 1969 or 1970. And I introduced him to Don. And so this time I was wearing the producer hat and Don was the manager. Then we come up to early 70s, 72, 73, and Don has created, the Boston Tea Party and become a concert promoter. I proceed to become a manager. So now he's wearing the promoter hat and I'm wearing the manager hat. And so the three of us have worn 6 different hats and stayed great friends all through it. He's a lovely man, extremely intelligent, very honest, but as anybody who's ever worked with him knows, extremely tough. And it's a pleasure for me to be able to extend my congratulations to Don for receiving this honor tonight. I can't think of anyone who would deserve it more.
Hi, Don. I've got many happy memories of Boston, especially in the 70s and 80s when we did so many shows with our great friend Frank Barcelona. However, one stands out, the Stones' 72 date at the Boston Garden. We were coming from Montreal and Boston was going through a crisis. The streets were full of kids rioting and the airport was closed because of fog. Half of the city was on fire, apparently, according to reports. We were therefore diverted to Providence, Rhode Island. A young photographer from the Journal was alerted by the security at the airport that the Stones were landing there and got to the airport and witnessed the Stones coming off the plane. In his zeal for a photo, he ran up to Keith Richards and stuck a lens in front of Keith's face. Keith, in return, stuck something in the photographer's face. As a result, we were arrested and locked up. It looked like the gig was going to be in jeopardy. I was allowed, as you are in these TV shows like Ironside, etc., one call, and I made it to Don Law. Don, we've got a problem. We're locked up and it doesn't look like we're going to make Boston. What can you do? Don said, let me try and deal with it. Okay, he called the governor. Kevin White, who at that point in time was a national figure and thinking of political office far beyond Massachusetts. He said to the governor, "Governor, you've got to help me on this one. I need you to come over to Boston Garden, calm the kids down because they're very restless and the word is out the Stones have been arrested. And although your city's in flames, please can you try and get the group out of jail?" The governor said, "Yes, okay, let me get over there." He addressed the crowd. Stevie Wonder, we asked to go on. I think he played 2 hours, probably the longest support slot in the history of rock and roll. In the meantime, Don addressed everything at the garden, the unions, the stagehands, the security, the management of the arena to make sure that everything would stay open and allow the Stones, if they were to get to Boston, to perform. To cut a long story short, the governor sprung the Stones. We got on our way. Don dealt with the unions and dealt with all the Boston Garden administrative people and the police and the security and everything. The Stones arrived about midnight. Stevie Wonder dragged himself off stage. The Stones went on and performed till 2 o'clock. Everything went fine. There were no incidents, no problems. The city was still in flames and under fog, but we even made money. Now that's a promoter who's got a handle on his market. A typical Don Law evening. Everything was dealt with calmly, quietly and professionally. Don, you've been a constant for 50 years in a very fickle market. You richly deserve this award. Well done.
Don, I wanted to say congratulations on this wonderful honor, Pollstar's Lifetime Achievement Award. In 1977, I booked Livingston Taylor at Syracuse University when you were managing him, and I was always amazed that someone of your stature would treat a college kid with such grace and intelligence and warmth. It never was lost on me. 50 years later, after you started the Boston Tea Party, home of such legendary artists as the Yardbirds, Jeff Beck, The Who, and so many others, you continue to bring a passion and a warmth to an industry that needs people like you. You've never lost that youthful exuberance. You've never lost your incredible joy for things like sailing and cars and family, and you put that all into the music industry. You have made Boston one of the most important stops on any concert tour. It is one of the great live music cities in the world, and it's your passion and love of live music and love of that market that has helped to create that environment. It is an amazing honor 50 years later for your peers to recognize all that you've done for the business, and I am thrilled to be part of that honor here today. You've been a good friend, a mentor, and someone who exemplifies all that makes the live music business special. Congratulations on this wonderful day and on the Pollstar Lifetime Achievement Award.
Hi Don, it seems like it was just last week when you were first presenting U2 at the Paradise, but actually it was a long time ago.
So when we learned that you were to receive this fantastic award, we thought it would be the perfect moment for us to say thank you and to offer our heartfelt congratulations for this deserved honor.
Have a great night tonight, and if you're up for a bit of Cape Cod sailing, let us know, but only if I can drive again. Thanks Don, congratulations.
Thanks Don.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome William Morris Endeavor World Music Division President Mark Geiger.
So I have to say, I think this is the first time I feel shitty for being young because I missed all that, and I don't know how I'm going to follow it up. But what I'd say is, if you live in Boston, Ted Williams, Carl Yastrzemski, Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Bill Russell, Larry Bird, David Ortiz, and Tom Brady are legends in sports. If you're in the tech world, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, Jerry Yang, David Filo, Andy Grove, Michael Dell, and Jeff Bezos. They are legends. In business, it's Warren Buffett, it's Jack Welch, it's Howard Schultz, it's Larry Ellison, Rupert Murdoch, and Ted Turner. They're legends. And then you get Muhammad Ali, Pele, Babe Ruth, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky. But if you're in our world, there's not that many legends. You had Ahmet Ertegun, Mo Austin, Jerry Weintraub, Bill Graham, Ron Delsner, maybe, just kidding. Kidding. And they're legends. But you're about to meet another member of that club, all right? Boston is dominated by a few things: the Red Sox, the Patriots, Celtics, the Bruins, Harvard, MIT, John Hancock, Gillette, and Don Law. He basically is New England for music, and he's endured more Boston and Harvard accents, and he still doesn't have one. He owns things that you don't know about and will never hear about. But his quiet influence and empire has dominated Boston just like those other companies since the Tea Party, and is at the top of the list in our business in terms of respect. I studied when I was young and trying to think about being in this business while I was also supposedly going to be a doctor, all the early promoters and the network around Frank Barcelona and a lot of the people you saw in the video, because for me it was about history books and learning about those people. And unfortunately for Don, I got introduced to Don by having to talk to Neil Jacobson all the time. Now, if you know Neil, very different from Don. So I didn't actually know him for a long time. I just thought, he's got to be a good fucking manager to manage Neil. I love you, Neil, you know this. Anyway, that's how my indoctrination came originally, Don Law, all right? And let me tell you, I was wondering who this Don Law legend was because the legend was so big, but he had to manage Neil. So anyway, when I finally met him, he was so goddamn nice to me, I kind of thought he mistook me for Irving Azoff. But I'll be damned if he wasn't the one guy who actually understood all my tech ramblings and future shit and where I thought the world was going, and he totally got it. And the truth is, I met two people in our business who are legends who actually have a curiosity and a thirst for what's going on now and don't live on their past glories, even though they're nice memories. It's all about what you're doing next. So today I'm here to introduce the lowest key, most stealthy, most handsome, smartest guy out there who happens to still look 45 years old at 73, and he's a little bit more like Tarzan maybe than a concert promoter. But I have to say, to be able to work in this business and admire and work with people like Don and then have them want you to talk about them is, I actually think I just got the award, frankly. So for my colleagues, it's my honor to present this year's Pollstar Honors Award to Don Law.
Who is that guy he was talking about? Thank you, Mark. I think there's no one I can think of who has more understood the future of the business over the decades than Mark Geiger. You know, he's always figured out what the next digital world would be, where we were headed, where we need partnerships, how we need to transform our business. And you've been prescient for many, many years. So it is a terrific honor to have you do this introduction. And we're all enormously grateful for your leadership. Thank you. I'd also like to thank the editors of Pollstar magazine, Gary Smith and Gary Bongiovanni, for considering this very flattering award for me. I follow Barbara Hubbard 2 years ago, and of course last year Dan Weiner and Freddie Bolander of Monterey Peninsula, who I have enormous respect for. I suppose one of the few rewards of getting older is you become eligible for awards like this. And of course, it makes me think of all the anniversaries we're having. We see acts on the road with their 40th anniversary. We're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Tea Party now. And a few years ago, we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Beach Boys. That this time had Brian Wilson on the road for the first time in decades. And I went to watch, and I wasn't sure what I was going to expect to see. I was enormously impressed with the fact that I thought in some cases it actually sounded better than the recording. Truth be known, they had some younger singers who were helping to augment that, but it sounded terrific. And I went backstage, And I asked one of the road crew, how was it with Brian on the road? And they said, oh, it was good, but there were these moments. And I said, what do you mean, these moments? He said, well, last week in New York, Bono came over and sat down in front of Brian and said, Brian, I have to tell you, you're a legend. We all stand on your shoulders. You're writing, you're arranging, you influenced the Beatles. Pet Sounds was one of those albums that transformed how we think about producing records. And Bono then said very graciously, is there anything I can possibly do for you? Would you please let me know? And Brian looked at Bono and said, could you get me a Diet Coke? And Bono got up and got him a Diet Coke, which is what we do in this business. I always love how Jimmy Buffett, or sometimes Jimmy Buffett, will start his show by saying he's a very lucky guy. He gets to play music, which he loves, and he gets paid for it. And for me, I was very lucky to grow up in a family that was fully immersed in music all the time. My mother was a classical concert pianist, and she played the piano 3 to 5 hours every day. And I'd sometimes be startled to come into our living room to find neighbors standing on the lawn watching. My brother could identify which symphony orchestra it was within moments of the needle being put on the record. And if you opened any closet in our house, records would come tumbling out because there wasn't much else in it. Also, as my father would then come home with the latest recording of Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs in the Foggy Mountain Boys, or the latest Johnny Cash record. And on our living room floor in 1960, I remember my father pulling out all of the original recordings he had done with Robert Johnson that became the album of Robert Johnson, King of the Delta Blues Singers. And looking at my father's logbook was like stepping back in time in early country and western and blues, Memphis Minnie, Bobby Blue Bland, Gene Autry, Bob Wills, and many more. And the game I played with my father was to try to guess the A and B side, and I grew confident that my judgment was right, but I had no choice but to love all kinds of music. I was lucky in college. I worked with Barry Tashin, who formed a band called Barry and the Remains, which actually is where I also got to know John Landau. And I helped them get their contract on Epic Records. They had a minor hit and then later got on the Beatles tour. And later in college, I met an interesting guy named Ray Reapin, who had been a successful corporate lawyer at Aerojet General in California and had come back to do graduate work at Harvard Law School and had gotten involved in something called the Filmmaker Cinematheque with Andy Warhol and Mel Lyman, as well as a dance hall they called the Boston Tea Party. And so what my boss and later partner had also done is he had seen what Tom Donahue had done at WKSAN and the fact that they were, for the first time in America, doing FM and doing FM rock and stereo. And he decided that he was going to do the same thing and came back to Boston. And what subsequently happened is that we went on to start that concert network. But it's important to point out what the late 60s was like. Airplay was dictated by crummy AM radio stations, which often meant if you wanted a record played, you had to pay payola. So by taking over WHCN in Hartford and WBCN in Boston, we then hired college disc jockeys, and we brought in a guy named Steve Siegel from KSAN who trained these college disc jockeys, and we broadcasted out of the back room of the Boston Tea Party. WBCN went on to be the highest rated station in New England. But to understand the background for the ballrooms in the late 60s is to go back sort of to the culture that's probably most accurately portrayed in Mad Men. It was a period of great upheaval because of the anti-war movement on college campuses. There was the drug culture that really emanated originally from Haight-Ashbury that helped fuel part of that rebellion. The ballrooms began to emerge. Chet Helms with the Avalon in San Francisco, Bill Graham with the Fillmore, Aaron Russo with the Aragon in Chicago, Bob Begaris in Detroit, Larry Maggot in Philadelphia, Graham again in New York, and us with the Tea Party in Boston. The business prior to the ballrooms was largely bar owners who put a stage in the corner. In the case of Doug Weston, would only agree to a play in Los Angeles if you gave him 3 to 5 replays. When I spoke at Frank Barcelona's memorial, I mentioned that I owed my start to a guy named George Papadopoulos. As it turns out, George owned the psychedelic supermarket in Boston, and he was both arrogant and not altogether trustworthy. Barcelona had just started Premier Talent and called George to book some of his recently signed English acts. George proceeded to give Frank the bum's rush. Frank soon appeared at my door and then explained how he had longed to be a successful country singer and had gone on the road under the name of Greg Mitchell. What transpired next was a continual stream of English acts that became legendary. The calendar, which is right there, from May of 1969, shows 3 days of the Jeff Beck group with Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood, 3 days of The Who doing Tommy, 3 days of Led Zeppelin, and a new band supporting the Velvet Underground called the Allman Brothers, who were doing their first date out of Georgia, who were also happened to be living in my living room. I should explain what the Tea Party was like. This had been a Baptist temple where the ballroom was up a steep set of stairs to the second floor. It was a 19th century brick and wooden building with white walls over the stage where it read, "Praise ye the Lord." It had a small balcony from which the light show was projected and massive white walls. In reality, it was a frightening fire trap with largely one main out the front stairs. We had a single fan operating over the ballroom, and the staff were not allowed up there in fear of fire. My building manager was a guy named Mitch, who had a long beard and a ponytail. He'd taken acid quite frequently, but he was a very good worker and kept the building in terrific shape. One night, when Van Morrison was playing, I was standing on the ballroom floor, and I looked up to see flames now coming from that ceiling fan. I rushed to the stairs, grabbed a fire extinguisher, and at the same time saw Mitch doing the same thing. And as we emerged into the attic over the ballroom, seeing the flames and the room filled with smoke, we realized we had one shot to release everything we had in the fire extinguishers, or it was going to be a serious life-threatening disaster. Incredibly, with all the water, we put it out and noticed that Van Morrison had the presence of mind while he was singing a song called Up the Ladder to keep singing, because if he'd stopped, he probably would have caused a riot. So I emerged back onto the floor, now the fire was out, and noticed that there was a large pool of water in the middle of the ballroom floor. So I approached one of the security guards and said, "I'm just curious, what did the audience say?" And he said, "Well, one fan said, 'Far out, light show.'" Frank Barcelona and later Herb Spar really changed the business. There no longer were options granted on replays. Unless you added something significant to the equation, then you'd not be getting the act next time. Over time, it became clear that one of the ways you could make a difference was to create better performing spaces. We'd entered into a long-term agreement with the Boston Symphony at Tanglewood, and that experience taught us that venues can add attendance, much the way the Hollywood Bowl does here in Los Angeles. The challenge was to capture part of that same ambience, but creating that ambience meant putting our business at risk. We knew we went for heavy landscaping to make our venues more of a park, and later we were fortunate to get the chance to build on Boston Harbor with extraordinary views of the water and the city. Financing a single-purpose venue proved extremely challenging, particularly when we decided to begin our own ticketing. Our model for ticketing was a system foregoing outlets for the internet and a very large IVR phone system, and this was more than 23 years ago. We initiated the first system to see your view from your seat. Everything we built subsequently had the challenge in mind to build something better, and I'm proud to say that all the venues we built have all won awards. But even though the promoter writes the check, we're still essentially a service company, which means on occasion you come up with strange requests. And years ago, we had an English act that's no longer touring that had an unusual request for a water that was not available in Boston, that required us ordering this from outside the market. And so we ordered large quantities to make sure that we were covered. What happened is the day of the show turned out to be quite hot, and the 1928 air conditioning system of the Boston Garden was really not up to the challenge. We also happened to notice that the Axe road crew were continually drinking this unusual water, which produced, once the audience was in, about an hour from the show, road manager approached me and said, "We're out of our favorite water." And I said, "Yeah, I noticed your crew were probably drinking a lot of it." And he said, "Yeah, but if you don't get more of it, we're not going on." I said, "You are kidding, aren't you?" And he said, "No, I'm perfectly serious." So I said, "Well, give me a few minutes. Let me see what I can come up with." So 45 minutes to the showtime, I came back and said, "We have a very good high-quality water bottled here in New England. I wonder if you would consider trying this, see if the ACT will approve it." We gave him a sample, and then he came back and said, "The ACT thinks it's fine," and the show's going on. And of course, it was Boston Garden tap water. For about a minute of my life, I sang with John Sebastian before he formed the Loving Spoonful. He probably doesn't remember me because I was not a very good singer. But he went on to write "Do You Believe in Magic?", which I've always seen as a refrain for our business. When everything is right and the performance is exceptional, there is truly a magic in the air, which all of us are fortunate to witness on occasion. It is an honor to be part of that experience, which makes this such a unique business. Someone asked me recently why I'm still doing this when clearly I may not have to. And the answer is, it's still fun, it's challenging, and I also happen to like Michael Rapino and think he's doing a very good job. So to my detractors, I have no intention of retiring. But I've also been blessed to work with very talented people who have made me look good over these many years. As was mentioned by Mark, we have Neil Jacobson in the Southeast, Jody Goodman in Northern California, Maureen Ford running part of the National Sponsorship Program. And making the trip from Boston are Declan and Anne Marie Mahegan, Diane Snow, Tim and Linda McKenna, Lance Tobin, Kagan Harrington, Denise Kirk, and Bob Duteau. But the Cambridge office has always been blessed with talented people, and I can't let this go any further without highlighting my close and dear friend, Doug Borg, who started as a security guard right out of college and has helped me look good for more than 45 years. It was his financial modeling that made much of this possible. And the person who deserves the most credit is my dear wife, Sarah, who's put up with me and this business for 40 years. I love you dearly. In closing, I want to express my deepest appreciation to the people of Pollstar for honoring me with this Lifetime Achievement Award. Thank you very sincerely.
So don't forget, Agents Live upstairs, 3 to 5, Diamond Ballrooms, and the award show this evening over at the Novo.